Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Vuka Nazo, your morning news analysis show. My name is Sihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. Remember, if you're watching the simulcast on Facebook or on YouTube, all you need to do is hit that like button and share the stream. Help me reach a much wider audience. Indeed, if you're watching on YouTube, then become, please, a subscriber to the channel. Subscribe and, of course, hit that bell notification so you're notified every time we are on air. Help me reach my goal of 50,000 subscribers. Guys, if you're looking to support the show financially, anything between 50 to 100 Rand a month, 75 Rand is about the average that we do per month, and consider please finding a payment method that suits you on our website. That's at bigdaddyliberty.co.za or .com. Now, enough with the jibber jabber. Let's get straight into the news. Ah, yes. Our political elites in this country, indeed the politicians in this country, never skimping a meal, never skimping on themselves. It is only the absolute best for them and poverty for you. What am I talking about? Well, the Democratic Alliance in Parliament having submitted a parliamentary question, the response they got back insofar as how much has been spent on the ministers via the ministerial handbook, that wonderful magical book that effectively Cyril Ramaphosa's cabinet gets to live large, and indeed them and their families live the ultimate life of luxury at your expense, dear South African, whether you're a taxpayer or even a poor South African. Well, the latest, of course, being that politicians have spent well over 58 million Rand of the money that they tax from you. I need to keep reminding you of that. The money is taken out of your pocket in order to enrich and line the pockets of politicians and their families in this country. Let me read from this Politics Web article, which effectively just lifts the press release from the DA, which says following. Now, of course, it says here that 58 million Rand in taxpayers' funds have been used in the last year to provide free electricity, water and security upgrades at the 97 luxury mansions themselves, by the way, that are valued at R1 billion, where they live, of course, courtesy of you, the taxpayer, in their homes in Cape Town and Pretoria. End of quote. Now, here's what makes this really funny. They get free electricity, they get free water, free lavish mansions, a property portfolio worth well over R1 billion. They get escorted around, of course, in luxury German sedans. They have an army of private security, or rather police officers that are their own, these bodyguards, of course. All their meals are covered, their flights are covered. What is it exactly that these ANC politicians pay for? What is it that they actually cough out of their own pockets for? Well, seemingly very little, as also these perks extend to their families. And again, I say this because right now, as we speak, let's see, I have what? Negative 900 Rand in my account. And I know a lot of you are in the same situation where you do not have money, you are barely making ends meet. Food prices in this country are becoming even prohibitive, where food is becoming a luxury in this country. The recent stats, of course, coming out indicating that food inflation has skyrocketed up by 16% in this country. So we are feeling the effects of a country which those same politicians who live large off of us push the misery and indeed terrible economic climate because of their policies onto us and our families. So it's poverty and misery for us and a lavish good life for them. Don't believe me? Let me give you one example. This country, of course, is racked by the specter of load shedding. Yes, it's become a little better now, but don't be troubled. Load shedding is still, the problem at least, still persists. It is because of bad policy by politicians who believe that the state should run the provision of electricity via a single producer of it, namely Eskom, a state-owned business. That is their policy, as opposed to a policy I would advocate for, which is to privatize Eskom and encourage the private sector to produce electricity. Oh, no, no. Instead, we have a single point of failure, and it's that reason is why South Africa has rolling blackouts. Now, we've experienced those rolling blackouts. Our businesses have suffered because of those rolling blackouts. People have lost jobs because of those rolling blackouts. And of course, you sit in the dark because of those rolling blackouts. Do you think the politicians who do this sit in the dark? Well, of course not. Let me read on here that explains how the politicians pay millions of rand to give themselves alternative power sources. The article again says that most shocking of all, this figure includes over 7 million rand spent on an alternative power supply for the mansions occupied by ministers and deputy ministers. End of quote. Must be nice to be a minister in the Republic of South Africa. You get to push poverty and bad policy onto everybody, whilst at the same time demanding, indeed stealing out of the pockets of South African citizens. Because ultimately, when a government is this large, this wasteful, and indeed this corrupt, taxation, therefore, is theft. All right, some feedback for you on a long developing story, one which we did rather amusingly a while back in episode 44 of Vuka Nazo. You remember, of course, the then Joburg coalition of the DA, Action SA, and various other parties, including COPE, at that time, found itself being backstabbed by a certain COPE councillor, Colleen Makhubele. You remember, of course, it was meant to be a routine voting in of a speaker, new speaker for the so-called Reform Coalition, DA, Action SA, etc., etc. Turned out to be a Judas Iscariot moment when Colleen Makhubele backstabbed her coalition buddies, siding instead with the ANC and the EFF, and then basically bizarrely claiming that this is a victory for minority parties. Let me remind you about that incident.
I am truly humbled. I'm truly grateful. I thank these women that are standing next to me. I thank this leader standing next to me. These are the minority parties that held hands and said, unless we all win, it's not a win in the city of Johannesburg. Today we have shown that the minority parties have a voice and we've got a big role to play in the city of Johannesburg. So I'm really grateful, I'm very happy, and I thank also the other parties that have supported us, the ANC, the EFF, all the big parties, all the councillors that have voted.
Now, again, as I said, this caused a lot of ructions. Indeed, the fallout from this has effectively seen the city of Johannesburg not come back to any form of stable governance since that particular incident. As you'll know, one councillor from Al Jamaa then eventually becoming the mayor of the city, backed, of course, by the ANC and EFF, that particular council collapsing back into the hands of that particular axis of evil. But now, we'll fast forward a few months later, and COPE seemingly has now finally taken the decision to axe Colleen Makhubele, with a letter, of course, doing the rounds on social media, purporting to be from the party's headquarters, indeed having even the signature of the party's president, Ewan Musiwa Lekota, of course, basically saying a letter of retraction of COPE's replacement for the PR Councillor of Tshwane, and of course, Ms. Colleen Makhubele's conduct. Basically, this letter effectively saying that Colleen Makhubele is no longer a COPE member, which would effectively mean she cannot hold the speaker's position anymore. Now, let me read this Citizen article, which basically wrote the story up and basically also pointed out how there's a bit of confusion and contestation within the party COPE, which, as you'll know, is basically split down the middle. The letter addressed to the Electoral Commission, the IEC, of course, is supposedly signed by the party's president, Musiwa Lekota. However, Makhubele herself says the letter is fake. The party's spokesperson, Dennis Bloom, also said he's unaware of Makhubele being fired from the party. The letter states that Makhubele's conduct had brought the organization into disrepute and therefore her membership has been terminated with immediate effect. End of quote. Now, that particular comment by Makhubele claiming that the letter is fake came via her social media page on Twitter, where you can see there basically saying fake news is what she's calling it, pulling a little Donald Trump there, Makhubele. But nonetheless, this speaks to that ongoing ruction, that ongoing disarray that characterizes South African political parties on the one hand, especially smaller political parties, but more so the coalition arrangements that we're seeing dissolve and collapse around the country. I've asked the question back then and I'll ask it again. Do these chaotic coalitions and indeed the chaotic conduct of these smaller parties basically make South African voters wary of trying any coalition agreements for the national elections next year. Are we going to see a situation of some people even saying we'd rather stick with the ANC, giving them a sole mandate, as opposed to trying a coalition at the national level or even provincial level, given the chaos that we've seen at a local government level? That question, dear voter, I'll leave with you. All right, a bit of update from yesterday's Vuka Nazo, of course, where you'll remember we introduced that breaking news of the 3 men who have been supposedly arrested in connection with the murder case of Keenan Forbes. That's, of course, famous rapper AKA. Now, this particular story, you'll remember I did mention, was not at the time verified by the police, and I must quickly say this. It still hasn't had the police actually confirm whether this is true or not, but the same publication from The Independent basically rewriting a follow-up story indicating and giving more details on this, citing its sources, of course, about these 3 men, including where they were arrested and some information, very interesting details around this particular matter. Let me go to The Independent. Now, one of the suspects of these 3 who are arrested is actually linked to a string of taxi killings in Mpangeni, that's in the north of KwaZulu-Natal. The men were traced to the Western Cape following a string of crimes in KZN, where they allegedly also posed as officials from social development, that's the department, where sources close to the investigation said the men would go house to house posing as SASSA agents and offering to help people register for social grants. Now, that's very interesting to me because it points to what I've said before about criminality in this country. Because of the fact that criminals view themselves as being immune to law enforcement, view themselves as never likely ever being caught, you often find criminals have diversified their criminality from doing one crime to doing another form of crime, basically as crimes of opportunity to make a quick buck at your expense, of course, at the expense of us, law-abiding citizens, at the expense of our lives, our liberty, and our property rights. And just listen to how extensive the network that these criminals belong to. Also allegations that they may even have some links to a prominent Cape Town gang, the Sexy Boys gang. But nonetheless, the article goes on to explain how the police in their investigation, having found them in Belhar and having arrested them, also found the vehicle said to have been used as the getaway vehicle from the night of the murder. Now, the police's investigation led them to Belhar, where they observed the gang's movements before apprehending them. Officers also found a white Mercedes-Benz believed to have been used as the getaway vehicle of AKA's murder. Of course, this vehicle is being searched for fingerprints and other clues to assist the investigation. End of quote. Again, I'll repeat what I said yesterday. Of course, we want justice for AKA, especially for his fans and his family and the like. But there is a bigger case here to be spoken about in twofold. One, the South African Police Service have an unfortunate history of bungling high-profile cases like this. So I'm not going to celebrate quite yet until I start seeing them come out firstly confirming the situation and indicating they have a strong case that they'll put forward to the National Prosecuting Authority. Secondly, this is the level of policing generally that we want to see for all cases in this country. We should eliminate this current trend, unfortunately, of the success and conviction rate of serious crimes such as murder being in the single digits. If I quote Ian Cameron from Action Society, basically indicating that the success rate for murder cases is about 3%. We need to change that and increase that and bring a fear within South African criminals that if they commit a crime, they will literally be caught and will serve the time. All right, that's it for the Wednesday edition of Vuka Nazo. Let me know what you think about these stories. And as always, I do invite you to check out the links in the descriptor of the video for all the stories that we did here today. You're also welcome to send some story suggestions to me. How do you do that? Well, you can get in touch with us, of course, at our website to do exactly that. That's bigdaddyliberty.com. Now, with you making your way out, please remember to hit that like button, share the show, and of course, subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube. Smash that subscribe button and hit the bell notification so that every weekday from 7 a.m. you're notified when Vuka Nazo is on your screens.